Okay, so let's start. So for today's topic is about explaining authentication and access controls. So let's take a proceed on our next topic. So for the contents, we have the introduction to authentication and access control. Next, we have authentication mechanism. Next, we have the protocols also. Next, we have the PKI, or what they call the public key infrastructures. Next, we have also the access control models. Next, we have the network access control, or yung tinatawag natin NAAC. And next, we have the zero trust architecture. And next, we have the identify and access management, or tinatawag natin IAM. And next, we have the access control list. Next, authorization versus authentication. And lastly, we have the challenge in authentication and access control. So let's take proceed on the introduction or what is authentication and access control. So authentication and access control are fundamentals to ensuring the security and the integrity of modern networks. So as organization, it's rely more heavily on digital system and networks, protecting sensitive data and resource become top priority. So number one dyan yung authentication. So authentication yung process of confirming identity of a user, device, or system attempting to access a network or a service. Its purpose is to para ensure that the entity trying to gain access who it's claimed to be. There are several methods of authentication. Number one is password-based authentication, which is the most common method where a user provides a unique password to gain access. Next, we have the multi-factor authentication, which is the combine of two or more authentications methods like password or biometrics to enhance security. Next, we have the biometric authentication. So it uses physical characteristics such as fingerprints, facial recognition to verify identity. Next, we have the certificate-based authentication, which is use digital certificates and cryptography to verify the identity of a user or devices. Effective ang authentication to reduce the risk of unauthorized user gaining access to sensitive resources and help establish a secure, trustworthy network. Okay, let's take proceed on access control. Once an entity is authorized or authenticated, access control define what the entity do with the network. It enforces rules and permissions to restrict access or to resource based on predefined policies, and also access control ensure that authenticated user are limited to only the data and the system necessary for their task. So, ito yung mga common access control models include DAC or what they call the discretionary access control, which access is granted based on the resource owner direction. Next, we have the role-based access control, which permission are assigned based on the user role or within an organization. Next, we have the mandatory access control, which access is determined by a central authority and typical used in highly secure environments. So together, authentication and access control work hand in hand to protect networks from unauthorized access, data breaches, and misuse of the data. They are essential to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, availability of network resources in both enterprise and personal environments. So as networks evolves with cloud services and remote work, these security measures are more important than ever to prevent cyber threats. Next, let's take a proceed on authentication mechanism. So authentication mechanism are the process to verify or use to verify the identity of a user, device, or system before allowing access to a network or service. The choice of authentication mechanism is critical in securing networks, as it directly impacts the system ability to prevent unauthorized access. Here are some key authentication mechanism. Number one is the password-based authentication, the most basic form of authentication where users provide a unique password to confirm their identity. While easy to implement, password-based systems are vulnerable to attacks like password guessing, phishing, and brute force. It is recommended to use strong complex password combined with password policies like regular updates and minimum length for enhanced security. Next, we have the multi-factor authentications, which add the layers of security by requiring two or more verification methods before granting access. So this includes something that the user knows, password or PIN, the user like smartphone or hardware token, like fingerprint or facial recognition. Also, MFA significantly reduced the likelihood of unauthorized access because even if one factor is compromised, the attacker still needs the other factors. Next, we have the biometric authentication, which is use the unique physical characteristic of an individual for identity verifications. Common biometric methods include fingerprints, retinal or iris scan, voice recognition, facial recognitions. Since these traits are unique to each individual, biometric authentication is considered highly secure. However, it requires special hardware and can raise privacy concerns. Next, we have the certificate-based authentication. This method used to digital certificates which are issued by trusted authorities to authenticate user or devices, which a digital certificate contains a public key like private key and also identifying information. The certificate is presented during the authentication process and it verified access is granted. Next, this method is commonly used in secure communication like SSL or TLS, which are widely adopted in enterprise environments for device and user authentications. Next, proceed tayo ngayon kay authentication protocols. So, our standardized method used to verify the identity of user or device within a network. This protocol ensures that the authentication process is secure, reliable, and preventing unauthorized access to network resources. So here are some key authentication protocols used in advanced networking. So number one dyan, yung RADIUS. O yung tinatawag nating Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service, which is a widely used protocol for centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting. O yung tinatawag natin AAA services. It works by providing or forwarding authentication requests from network devices like router, switches, to central radio server. Next, where our user credentials are verified. Also, it's commonly used in enterprise network and VPNs for verifying remote user. Next, we have the TACACS Plus, or what we call the Terminal Access Control System Plus, which enhanced version of the TACACS protocol and primarily used for authenticating network devices such as routers or switches. Unlike Reduce, TACACS Plus separates the function of authentications, authorizations, and accounting, offering more flexibility and control over user access. It is often used in Cisco networks for device management. Next, we have the LDAP, or what we call the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. It used to authenticate user by accessing directory service like Active Directory or what we call the OpenLDAP. It is highly efficient for managing large user database and widely used in corporate environments for a single sign-on or what we call the SSO and centralized identity management. Also, allowing user to authenticate once and gain access to multiple servers across the network. Next, we have the Kerberos. Kerberos is a secure authentication protocol that uses symmetric cryptography to authenticate the user. It is designed for secure mutual authentication between users and service over non-secure networks. Kerberos works by issuing a tickets that are used to access network resources without needing to repeatedly send credentials, commonly used in Windows domains and Unix environments. Next, we have the Open Authorizations, or OAuth. It's an open standard for token-based authorization primarily used in web applications. It allows users to authenticate on one platforms like Google or Facebook and use the same credential to access other services like third-party apps without sharing password. Open authorization enhance security by using access tokens to authorize requests without exposing sensitive credentials. Next, we have the SAML, or Security Assertion Markup Language. SAML is an XML-based protocol used for single sign-on SSO between different organizations or services. It enables users to authenticate once with their identity provider, like Google or Microsoft, and then access multiple services like cloud application without re-entering credentials. CAML is popular in enterprise environments where multiple services needed to be accessed with a single set of credentials. Next, we have the CHAP, or Challenge Handshake Authentication Protocol, which is used to authenticate remote user typically in PPP, or what we call the point-to-point protocol connections. So it works by sending a challenge to the user who must respond with a hash version of their password. The server verifies this hash to complete authentication and also add an extra layer of security compared to a simple password-based protocols. Next, we have the EAP, or what we call the Extensible Authentication Protocol, which is a flexible framework used in wireless network like Wi-Fi, and point-to-point connections also support multiple authentication methods, including password-based, certificate-based, and token-based methods. It's often used in WPA or WPA2 for secure wireless network authentications. So let's proceed on the public key infrastructure. So public key infrastructure is a system that manages digital certificates and encryption key to facilitate secure communication and authentication over networks. PKI is essential for establishing trust between user, devices, and system by using cryptographic techniques. So number one dyan, digital certificates, which is PKI use digital certificates to verify identities. These certificates are issued by trusted entities known as certificate authorities, or CA, and contains in a public key along with the information about the certificate holder. The certificate is used to confirm the authenticity of the holder during communications. Next, we have the public and private key. PKI relies on a pair of cryptographic keys, which is public and private, which is the public key shared openly and used for encryptions, while the private key is kept secret and used for decryption or digital signatures. This ensures that even if data is intercepted, it cannot be easily decrypted without the private key. Next, we have the Certificate Authority, or CA. The CA is responsible for issuing and verifying digital certificates, which act as a trusted third party that ensuring that the certificate holder identity is valid. In enterprise environments, CA can be internal, or what we call the private, or external or public, like VeriSign or Let's Encrypt. Next, we have the SSL and TLS. PKI is often used in SSL TLS protocols, which secured internet communications by encrypting data exchange between web servers and clients. The server certificate authenticates its identity and establishes a secure encrypted connections. Lastly, we have the key management. Proper key management is critical to success of PKI. It involves the generation, distribution, storage, and revocations of the keys and certificates. If a key is compromised, the corresponding certificate must be revoked, and the CA must issue a new one. So let's take a proceed on access control models. Access control models are defined how access to resource and data is managed within a network or system. They establish the policies and procedures for determining who can access what resource and under what conditions. So, here are the main access control models. Number one, discretionary access control or DAC, which the resource owner or creator has discretion to set access permission for their resources. These models allows user to control access to their own files and data, which can be shared or restricted according to their preference. While DAC provides flexibility and ease of management and can lead to security risks as your user may inadvertently grant access to unauthorized individuals or fail to manage permission effectively. Next, we have the mandatory access control or MAC. MAC is a more rigid access control model where access permission is enforced by a central authority based on the predefined security policies. User cannot modify this permission. They are determined by the classification of data and the user security's clearance. MAC is commonly used in environments where highly security is essential, such as government or military systems. It's ensured that the access to the sensitive information is strictly controlled and enforced according to established security levels. Next, we have the role-based access control or RBAC, which assign access permission based on a user role within an organization rather than individual user identities. Roles are defined according to job functions or responsibilities, and permission are granted to this role. User inherit a permission based on their assigned role. This model simplifies the management of access controls, especially in large organizations, as it reduces the complexity of managing individual permissions and ensure that the user only have a access to the resource necessary for their job functions. Next, we have the attribute-based access control or ABAC, which is more dynamic and flexible model that determine access based on attributes related to user, resources, and environment. Attributes can include user role, the, department affiliations, resource type, and contextual information such as time or locations. ABAC allows for fine-grained access control and can accommodate complex access scenarios by evaluating multiple attributes to make access decisions. This model provides a high level of customizations but require a well-defined attribute set and policies. Lastly, we have the rule-based access control, which use predefined rules to determine access permissions. These rules are typically established by administrators and can include conditions like time of day, location, or specific events. For example, accessing to certain system might be restricted to business hour or require specific network conditions. Role-based access control is often used in conjunction with other models such as RBAC or DAC to provide additional layers of control and flexibility. Next, We have the Network Access Control or NAAC, which is a security solution that manage and enforce policies for accessing network. Also ensure that only compliant and authorized device can connect to the network, thereby reducing the risk of security breaches and ensuring controlled network environment. So here are the key components and concept of NAC. Number one dyan, yung authentication and authorizations. NAC system authenticate device and user attempting to access the network. They verify the identity of the device or user and ensure they have the appropriate permissions. This process typically involves checking credentials, digital certificates, or other forms of identifications before granting access. Next, we have the compliance checks. Before allowing a device to connect, NEC solutions perform a compliance checks to ensure all that the device meets the organization's security policies. This includes verifying that the device has up-to-date antivirus software, security patches, and proper configuration settings. Devices that do not meet these requirements may be denied access or placed in quarantine network with limited functionality. Next, we have the policy enforcement. NAC system enforce security policies based on predefined rules and configurations. These policies govern which device or user can access a specific network, resource, and under what conditions. For example, a policy might restrict access to sensitive data only to devices that are compliant with a certain security standard. Next, we have the network segmentation. NAC enables network segmentation by dividing the network into different zones based on the security levels or user roles. This help contains potential threats by isolating critical resource from less secure area of the network. Devices that pass compliance check can be granted access or to higher security segments, while non-compliant device may be restricted to lower security segments. Next, we have the endpoint visibility and management, which NAC provides visibility into all devices connected to the network, including their status and compliance level. This visibility allows administrators to monitor, also manage network access effectively, identify unauthorized device, and respond to potential security threats. Next, we have the dynamic access control, which NAC system can dynamically adjust access permission based on real-time conditions and context. Like for example, if a device security posture change, NAC can automatically update its access level or quarantine it until compliance is restored. Next, this dynamic approach helps address emerging threats and adapt to changing security requirements. Next, we have the integration with security tools. NAC solutions often integrate with the other security tools and systems such as firewalls, intrusion detection system, and security information and event management, or what we call the CIEM. This integration enhances overall network security by providing a comprehensive view or network activity and enabling coordinated response to threats. Lastly, we have the guest network management. NAC system can manage guest access to the network by providing separate access control for guests and also ensure that the guest device have limited access to network resources and are isolated from critical systems, reducing the risk of potential security breaches. Next, proceed tayo ngayon sa Zero Trust Architecture. So, Zero Trust Architecture or ZTA is a comprehensive security models that operates on the principle of never trust, always verify. Unlike traditional security models that rely heavily on perimeters defense to protect internal networks, Zero Trust assumes that the threats could be present both outside and inside the network. And here, are the concept or core principles of components of zero trust architecture. Number one, never trust, always verify, which does not automatically trust any user or device based on their location, whether they are inside or outside the corporate network. Instead, every access request is treated as if it originates from an untrusted network. Verification through authentication and authorization is required for every access request, ensuring that the trust is never assumed. Next, we have the least privilege access, which this principle restrict user and device to the minimum level of access necessary for the role and task by limiting access to only what is needed. The risk of potential damage from compromised accounts or device is minimized also. Least privilege access in enforced through role-based access control or RBAC and granular policy settings. Next, we have the microsegmentation, which is uh, employs or sabi natin to divide the network into smaller, isolated segment or zones. These segmentations reduce the attack surface and limits the movement of potential threats within the network. Each segment is secured individual and access tightly controlled based on their roles and policies. Next, we have the continuous monitoring, which is a critical component of zero trust that involves ongoing analysis of user behavior, devices status, and network traffic to detect anomalies and potential threats. Real-time monitoring allows for rapid response to suspicious activities, ensuring that security measures adapt to evolving threats. Next, we have continuous monitoring. So, yari na tayo dito. So, strong authentication and authorizations. So, zero trust mandates a use of strong authentication methods such as multi-factor authentication or MFA to verify user identities, which authorization process are used to ensure that user and device have their appropriate permission to access specific resources. This approach helps prevent unauthorized access and enhance overall security. Next, we have the data encryption, which encryption is a fundamental aspect of zero trust applied both to data in transit and at rest. Encrypting data ensures that the sensitive information is protected from unauthorized access even if intercepted or accessed by an attacker. Encryption policies are enforced across the network to safeguard data integrity and confidentiality. Next, we have the policy environment, which is trust relies on comprehensive policies enforcement to maintain security standard across the organizations. Security policies are defined based on user role, device compliance, and contextual factors. These policies govern access control, data protection, and network usage, ensuring consistent security practices. Next, we have also identify and access management or IAM, which are framework policies, technologies, and process that manage and secure user identities and their access to resources within a organizations. So IAM ensures that the right individual have the right access to the right resources at the right time. So here are some key components and concept of IAM. Number one is the user identity management, which manage the user identities by creating, maintaining, and deleting user accounts, and also includes managing personal information, authentication credentials, and user roles. Identify the management, ensure that the user profiles are accurate and up to date, facilitating seamless access to system and applications. Next, we have the authentications, which verifies the identity of a user before granting access to resources. So, IAM systems are used various methods for authentications, including password, multi-factor authentication, biometric verification, and smart cards. Authentication ensures that the user are who they claim to be and enhancing security. Next, we have the authorization, which determine what resources or action is a user is allowed to access when authenticated. IAM system enforce access control based on a user role, permissions, and policies. Authorization ensures that user only have access to the resource necessary for their roles, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access. Next, we have the access control policies, which involves defining and enforcing access control policies that dictate how users interact with the systems and data. These policies are based on the principles such as least privilege, role-based access control, and attribute-based access control. Access control policies help maintain security and compliance by restricting access based on a predefined rules. Next, we have the single sign-on o tinatawag natin SSO that allows user to access multiple application or system within a single set of credentials. IAM systems implement SSO to improve user convenience and reduce password fatigue. By streamlining the authentication process, SSO enhance user experience while maintaining security. Next, we have also identifying federation, which is enable user to access resources across different domains or organization using a single set of credentials. This is achieved through federated identity standards such as SAML, which is the Security Assertion Markup Language, and open authorizations. Federation is simplify user management and improves collaboration between organizations. Next, we have the user provisioning and deprovisioning. So, IAM system automate the process of user provisioning by creating and assigning access rights, and deprovisioning, which is revoking access based on the changes in user status or role. Automation ensures that access rights are updated promptly, reducing the risk of unauthorized access due to outdated and incorrect information. Next, access auditing and reporting. IAM system providing auditing and reporting capabilities to track and analyze user access and activity. Also, access logs and reports help organizations monitor compliance, detect potential security issues, and conduct investigations. Regular auditing ensures that the access control are effective and aligned with the security policies. Next, we have the compliance and governance, which support regulatory compliance by enforcing security policies and maintaining access control standards. It helps organization meet compliance requirements for data protections, privacy, and industry-specific regulations. Governance features ensure that access management practice align with organizational policies and standards. Next, we have the self-service capabilities. IAM system often includes self-service features that allows users to manage their own account information, reset password, and request access changes. Self-service reduces the administrative burden on IT staff and empower users to handle routine tasks efficiently. Next, proceed tayo ngayon sa access control list. Number 1, or sabi natin, our access control lists are crucial component in managing and enforcing access to resources within a network or system. They define which user or group have permission to perform specific action on resources, such as files, directories, or network devices. So here are detailed look at ACL. Number 1 is definition, which is an ACL is a list of associated with resource that specify access permission for user or groups. Each entry in ACL defines the level of access granted to a specific user or group, including action such as read, write, execute, or delete. Also, ACL help manage and enforce security policies by ensuring that only authorized individuals can access or modify resources. Next, we have the type of permissions. We have the read, which allows user to view the contents of resource. We have the write, permits user to modify or add the resource. Execute, which grants user the ability to run, execute the resource such as files or script. And lastly, we have the delete, enables user to remove the resources or its contents. Next, we have the resource-based ACL. ACLs ACL are applied to specific resources such as files, directories, or network devices. Each resource can have its own ACL that specify which user or group have access and what type of access they are granted. This allows for granular control over access to individual resources. Next, we have the user and group entries. The order in which ACL entries are evaluated can impact access decisions. Typically, ACL are evaluated from top to bottom, and the first applicable entry determines the user access level. Next, we have the deny overrides allow. Which is in many implementations, deny permission take procedure or precedence over allow permissions. If an ACLS entry explicitly denies access, this deny rule will override any allow permissions that may be specified elsewhere in the ACL. These features ensure that critical security restrictions are enforced regardless of other permissions. Next, we have the discretionary ACL, which is the resource owner have the authority to set and modify ACL for their resources. This provides flexibility but requires careful management to prevent security misconfigurations. Next, we have the mandatory access control, which is enforced ACL based on the predefined security policies set by the system or administrator. Unlike DAC, MAC, or MAC does not allow resource owners to modify ACL. Next, we have the network ACL. In networking, ACL are used in routers, switches, and firewalls to control the flow of network traffic. Network ACL define rules for allowing or blocking network packets based on the criteria such as IP address, ports, and protocols. Next, we have the dynamic ACL, which some systems support dynamic ACL, which can change based on the context or condition. For instance, dynamic ACLs might adjust permission based on the factors like time or day, which is the user roles or the current security status of the system. Next, authorization versus authentication. Authentication and authorization are two fundamental concepts in security that are often used interchange but serve distinct roles in protecting resource and system. So in authentication, it's the process of verifying and identifying the user or a system. It ensures that entity like user, device, or applications is who they claim to be. So the primary goal of authentication is to establish the identity of the user entity accessing the system. Also, this process involved in confirming that the credentials provide match the credentials stored or recognized by the system. Next, methods. So authentication can be achieved through various methods including passwords, multi-factor authentications, biometrics, and also smart cards. Next, authentication focuses on providing identity, answers the questions who are you, and is concerned with verifying that the individual or system is legitimate. So, in terms of authorization is the process of determining what an authenticated user or system is allowed to do. It defines the permission and access levels granted to authenticate entity. So the primary goal of authorization is to manage and control access to resources based on the permission and policies. It ensures that only once one and that once an identity is authenticated, they can only perform action or access resources that they are authorized to. So, authorization involves implementing various mechanisms like access control list or ACL, role-based access control or RBAC, attributes-based access control or ABAC, and policies. It focuses on permission and access control that answer the question, what can you do? And determines the scope of action and resources available to the authenticated entity. So, in summary, authentication confirms the identity of a user or system and providing who are you or you are. Next, in authorization naman, determines what an authenticated user or system is permitted to do, or it is about defining what you can do. Next, last tayo, what are the challenges in authentication and access control? So, authentication and access control are critical components of security, but they come with a range of challenges. Addressing this challenge is crucial for maintaining robust security measures. So here are some common challenges. Number one is password management. Weak if it's possible, meron tayong mga weak password. And then, password reusing, forgot password, and phishing attacks. Next, we have the multi-factor authentication, which is we have the user resistance, implementation from complexity, and accessibility. So, in terms of user resistance, some users find MFA inconvenient and may result using it leading to weaker security practices. Implementing complexity into existing system can be complex and may require additional resources. So, in terms of accessibility, MFA solutions such as SMS or email-based codes may be less accessible for some user or regions. Next, in terms of managing access control, in role chips, over time users may accumulate excessive permission due to changes in roles, which can lead to security vulnerabilities. Next, we have in terms of complex policies. Managing complex access control policies can be challenging, especially in large organizations with many resources and users. Next, we have dynamic environments, such as cloud-based system, maintaining up-to-date access control policies can be difficult. Next, we have identity management, also insider threats, and access control in cloud environments, compliance and regulatory requirements, security of authentication mechanism, user education and awareness, integrity, or lastly, we have the integrity and compatibility. So, ayun yung mga challenges natin in terms authentication and access control. So, that's it for explaining what's authentication and access control. Thank you.